it's Galfi Galfette.
Today I'm going to tell you everything about the chord track. This track has several uses. It can, hence the name, allow you to simply play chords, even complex ones, but it can also suggest chords to follow those you already have. Finally, it can also be used to identify chords and scales played on an audio track. To begin with, adding a chord track is just like adding any other track. You can either click on the little plus button at the top left of the project area. If you don't see the chord track, it's in More Tracks. Or, more simply, right-click in the same area, then select Add Track and Chord Track. Here, I've located it in the upper part of the project area using the horizontal divider. The horizontal divider separates the audio, MIDI, group and effect tracks from the other tracks, which I call utilities, such as the chord track, tempo track, arranger track, and so on. If you want to know more about the arranger track, I talked about it in a previous video. I'll put the link to this video in the description. The advantage is that, even if you have a lot of tracks, the utility tracks will remain at the top of the project area, allowing you to find your way around your tracks more quickly. Right now, this chord track is useless, there are no chords and no sound. I'm going to add an instrument track with Retrologue, a synth that comes as standard with Cubase. So, right-click, Add Track, Instrument Track, and choose Retrologue. To get sound in the chord track, I'll link my chord track with Retrologue. This way, any chords I have on my chord track will sound like Retrologue, even if there's nothing on my Retrologue track. On my chord track, instead of Use Monitored Tracks, I click and choose my Retrologue track. This way, anything played on the chord track will have the sound of my Retrologue track, even if there's nothing on that track. To draw a first chord, I use the pencil tool and click where I want to add a chord. A square with the letter X appears, indicating that no chord is defined at this point. You'll also see that the default scale is C harmonic minor. When you click on the scale name, you can hear the first notes of the scale. To define a first chord, I double-click on the X, which gives me access to two tools, the chord editor and the chord assistant. The editor lets you choose a chord according to 4 parameters: root, oat, chord type, tension, and bass note. We'll come back to this later in the video. The chord assistant offers 3 modes, a list of suggested chords based on the previous chord. As there is no previous chord, this list is currently empty. The proximity mode, which shows the proximity of chords to the selected one. Again, this window is empty, as there is no chord selected. The circle of fifths, a graphic representation of the 12 major chords on the outer circle. Roman numerals identify the position in the scale. For example, here, C is marked I, the first note of the scale. The inner circle represents the 12 corresponding minor chords. You can also switch from a major to a minor scale by clicking on the button at top right. Click on a chord to listen to it directly. You can also use the center arrows to change the starting chord. Each click on an arrow plays the chord concerned. To add another chord, you can click on the little plus button, which will add a new X to the next bar. You'll now notice that proximity mode offers you a large number of chords. Their color depends on their logical proximity to the selected chord. The greener the color, the more classic the chord progression. The redder the color, the less classical the chord progression. The list mode offers the same kind of choices on the same principle, with additional options. The 2 arrows at top right let you listen to chords placed on the chords track one after the other, to hear the result in real time. You can delete a chord either by right-clicking and selecting Delete, or by using the eraser tool. You can also select the chord and press the Del key on your keyboard. Right-clicking allows you to perform several actions, such as changing the color, which you can also do simply by selecting the chord and clicking on the palette. Once you've defined the chords on the chord track, you can drag them one by one onto the Retrologue track, or select them all and import them at once. For example, here's what my 4 chords sound like at the moment. You can then edit them via the MIDI editor by double-clicking on one of the chords. I'll tell you more about the MIDI editor in a later video. You can also define your own chords or edit the chords in the chord track using the chord editor. You'll notice that every chord change is played immediately. And you can always move from one chord to another using the arrows to make sure the chords are rendered in sequence. I advise you to mute the chord track when you want to listen to your project. If it's not muted, it will play at the same time as the other tracks. A final feature of the chord track is the ability to define the chords and scales used in an audio track. To do this, simply drag the audio event onto the chord track. This can be useful for many things, for example, doubling a guitar line with a synth track. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know in the comments. See you soon for new videos.